In this global health crisis, underprivileged children have been most impacted. The pandemic has forced millions of kids into child labor. According to the International Labour Organization and UNICEF, before the pandemic, there were approximately 152 million children trapped in child labor, out of which 72 million were in hazardous working conditions. The upsurge of child labor amidst the pandemic has ruined the childhood of many. COVID-19 and the hunger it has brought about is even a bigger challenge. Starving is a bigger threat to their health and immunity. As businesses crash, the chances of them resorting to hire cheap child labor is becoming more rampant. Many experts fear that the fight against child labor will fail amidst the pandemic if enough action is not taken. International Labour Organization has predicted that the world may witness a surge in child labor for the first time in 20 years amid the COVID-19 pandemic. According to the data of 2011 census, India had more than 10 million child laborers between the age of 5 to 14. This problem is not uniform across the country. States like Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Rajasthan, Maharashtra and Madhya Pradesh, they are the epicenters and have higher prevalence of child labor. The UN Secretary General's Global Humanitarian Response Plan says that 2021 will mark the UN International Year for the Elimination of Child Labour. But with the present impasse, it is unlikely to be achieved. New Delhi Bureau, Democracy News Live.
Child labor is an issue which is very close to my heart. It was in the early 2000s that I started going after the issue. Young girls in sex trade, children being abused in sweatshops by majors like Gap. Good evening. You're watching Democracy News Live. You're watching our show, It Matters. There have been large efforts by people against child labor. India has the Nobel Peace Laureate Kailash Satyarthi, who has worked on the issue for years now. While the world has been slowly winning the war, COVID-19 has plunged the world back into the crisis. The pandemic has ruined childhood for many kids. The root cause of child labor? Poverty. The other big problem is ineffective governance that allows child labor to be used by the informal sector. UNICEF, whose annual income is $5.2 billion, has not been able to obviously fix the issue. There are 152 million child labor in the world. A large part of them are in hazardous professions. If UNICEF even started funding the child labor with its budget, possibly we would have a resolution. COVID-19 and child labor, it's a time of crisis. It's a time to act. I'm going to start the show with two of our panelists. This is Jyoti Malhotra. She is a director at Kailash Satyarthi Children's Foundation. She's based in Delhi. She's worked with the Government of India on special laws for the protection of children, such as the JJ Act, POXO Act. And we are joined by Archana Pathak Dave. She's practicing as an advocate on record at the Supreme Court of India, representing central government and various public sector undertakings before the Honorable Supreme Court. I welcome you both to the show. First of all, let me start with you, Mrs. Mathur. Tell me, has the situation worsened this time during the pandemic?
Good evening, and I would, before I respond to your question, I would just like to take you back to the figures that you showed in the beginning of the show, which said that, with 152 million child laborers across the globe, out of which, 10.13 million are in our country. So if this is a number of, child laborers in the country, what is the response of the government pre-pandemic? So if we look at pre-pandemic, in 2016, if we see the National Crime Records Bureau report, which collects data on laws related to child labor, it said that, 204 FIRs were registered in 2016, which went up to 464 FIRs in 2018. If we look at the cumulative numbers of these 3 years, 2016 to 2018, then just 0.02% of the child laborers in our country were actually rescued. So this was the situation pre-pandemic. And post-pandemic, I mean, it's in the current situation where pandemic is still on, and the lockdown has eased and the economic activity is gradually resuming, and the focus is on minimizing losses and maximizing profits. The easiest way to do that is to get free labor or labor which is cheap. And if that is the situation, then child labor, of course, is one where children, and you also know that the many state governments have also relaxed labor laws. So which is another, along with the pandemic, there is an added another burden on children, where child labor is expected to increase phenomenally. And we already have a SDG goal of ending child labor by 2025, which if pre-pandemic situation, that we were not going to achieve it, because in 2011 we had 10.13 million child laborers, and according to projections done by a research by Kailash Satyarthi Children's Foundation, we found that by 2025 we'll have somewhere around 74.3 lakh child laborers in the country. So this is pre-pandemic, and with the current situations, this is only going to increase, and that is what we are also witnessing when we are doing our programs, and when our rescue operations and the intelligence that we are receiving, on the basis of which rescue operations are taking place by us. Yes, child labor and trafficking of children for all kinds of exploitation, including labor and sexual exploitation, is going to increase. And one more point
Absolutely. No,
I'll
Jyoti.
speak before I
No,
conclude.
sorry, sure.
Yeah.
Please, go. Jyoti,
So, Mr.
so let me
Kailash,
let me let me let me crystallize what you were saying. You're saying while the situation wasn't great earlier, the pandemic has increased the problem. There are many more looking for it, and you have to remember when there is poverty, which is one of the main causes of child labor, is going. It has gotten exasperated now. There are a lot of fly-by-night operators. People aren't, paying enough attention to child labor. But you, on the other hand, have rescued about 1,000 children only in the last few
yes,
weeks, right? And this
yes,
is because they have recognized they constantly work on it. Let me bring in Ms. Dave. Ms. Dave, there are a lot of laws which have been enacted. Explain to me, why do laws never get implemented? Isn't there like a committee to monitor that we've enacted a law, now we are in charge of the legal system, but it never gets implemented? Child labor continues to stay very much at the forefront. If there are millions of children running around this country and there is nobody watching it, then what is all this administration about?
Yeah, um, I think Rohit, the most important point in this issue is that here we are dealing with children. See, when you're dealing with adults, mainly they can go to the police station, they can report about a crime, they know about the police system, they know about how it works, broadly. But when we are now concerned about children, it's very difficult because one, they don't know that there are enough laws, they cannot report them properly. And whenever you are having this problem of child labor, they are usually confined, and they have been put in such a situation where they don't know how to get out. However, when you're talking about laws, I must tell you that it's not just the national legislations we have, but we also have constitutional provisions safeguarding, the rights of children. And in spite of that, there are this problem. It's going huge, and we are not able to control it at all. I guess the main problem is not about the laws. We have many laws in place, and there is no problem as far as the laws are concerned. But somewhere down the line, I feel there is some kind of administrative laxity in the whole system, because there are people who cannot speak up for themselves, and they cannot come and tell you that, look, I am in problem, and rescue me. So you have to have a situation, you have to have a team that dedicatedly works for the betterment of children. And as soon as you get a knowledge that somewhere something is happening, immediately the administrative action should happen. The police should have their boots on and go and rescue. uh, Also, there is one situation where mostly the big construction industries, the beady making industries, all these kind of local industries are also having too much of children present there who are working as laborers. And they are big people, they are minting money like anything. So, well, I'm not directly saying anything, but they are kind of, they are able to manage and not get caught and still go ahead with having children employed in their industries. So I feel that is the biggest issue which we are facing. And also, when
Sure,
you're
no.
talking
So
about the
actually, you make a
pandemic.
good point, Ms. Dave. Let me go back to Jyoti on this. Jyoti, how come a large part of the industry is able to get away? I think Ms. Dave is making a good point, saying that a large part of this very organized sector is able to get away with, murder, if you want to call it this.
Yeah. So this is actually when you look at the supply chain of industries where children are employed, and despite having laws not just at the center but at the state level, if you look at the number of laws we have in our country to look at all the labor disputes, there are almost 100 state laws and 40 central laws looking at different aspects of child of labor. But the intent to implement them, the intent to ensure that the law enforcement agencies take adequate action is something that is missing. So talking specifically about child labor, what we have seen during our raids that under the leadership of Kailash Satyarthi we have been doing, rescued around 90,000 children till date. The biggest challenge that we see is that the children are rescued, but FIRs are never registered by police, and it has become a cognizable offense after the amendment 2016. But even then, it's very hard for us to ensure that an FIR is registered in a case. Unless an FIR is registered, convictions and booking the employer, taking penal action against him becomes very difficult. So what happens, we have seen in the field, is that children are rescued, handed over back to the parents, and they get back because the rehabilitation part is not happening properly, and they are re-trafficked and go back into the labor market again. So it's a vicious circle. So they get rescued, again come back to the same situation, because the responsibility of the law enforcement agencies, that what they're required to do is not happening. Conviction is very low, and that is the reason that it's not being properly.
Right. No, I exactly hear you. So, isn't there like a Supreme Court committee which kind of suo moto works on its own, says identification of these children, and then when the children are found, if those FIRs aren't registered, then taking the police to task? Miss Dave, has the Supreme Court not really acted on it, and why hasn't it acted on it? It goes and acts on, small issues where even journalists who are aligned with the government seem to be, protected by the Supreme Court. But what does it take for the Supreme Court of India to take action when such major issues exist?
Let me tell you, Rohit, Supreme Court has been very, very active where these issue of child labor are concerned. And time and again, the court has asked the government to get the data and also see that the FIRs are registered, and also maintain a database so that you may, it's once you have such an issue and then you report it, then an FIR is registered. But what Ms. Mathur was telling just now was very apt, because once you have sent them back to their parents, then again the problem starts, because it's also the basic problem is poverty, so they are not able to continue sitting at home, and it's most of the times it's the parents who again send them back to the occupation that they were doing before. The whole, it's a vicious circle in which a child is caught. So even no matter what all things you do, how much you do, but till the family knows and understands that they should not be pushed into such kind of things, then it is really, really very difficult. Now, as Ms. Mathur was also saying that the FIR, the registration of FIR is very difficult, because you understand that these people, they're the whole family, it's the population is another big thing. It's a huge family, and they are mostly sometimes dependent on the money that the child is getting. So more hands, more work, and more money. So parents are also, they lack that desire to register the FIR or to get it registered, because ultimately then the whole thing comes down to sustenance. How will they sustain themselves if everybody is just sitting and not working? So the court, time and again, has set up the committees, has asked the government to come up and to tell them the figures, and they keep giving their instructions, they keep giving them guidelines, but till, the whole system works as a whole, it is very, very difficult to tackle this huge, huge problem.
Okay. I'm going to bring in Govind here if he's joined and if his video is still working. Govind was a child labor, as you know, and he was rescued by Kailash Satyarthi. Govind, can you hear me? Govind, can you hear me? I see it's a frozen video. So, Jyoti, I'm going to come back to you. You guys are carrying out a campaign. Obviously, the numbers of where the child labor is in the country, it's pretty, organized in that fashion. There is a lot of data around what state is responsible. Bihar is one of the states which is obviously got the highest number of child labor. You guys are right now carrying out a campaign. Explain that campaign to me a bit.
Yes, the campaign, it's called Mukti Karma campaign. It's a survivor-led campaign on wheels. So it has been running since 1997 to spread awareness on the issues related to trafficking and child labor in poor areas of the country. And now, because of the pandemic and because of the social distancing norms that one needs to follow, so it cannot be earlier it used to be a small bus where these survivors used to travel and then sensitize people on this issue. So now we have launched it on bicycles, and we are focusing on 10 districts of Bihar which are notorious for child trafficking. These are Katihar, Sitamarhi, Darbhanga, Madhubani, and Gaya. So here, the survivors of trafficking and survivors of child labor, they are leading the campaign. They are going to these districts and sensitizing people. It's basically about prevention of trafficking. So one aspect is that they are sensitizing people on what can be done to protect children. What are the different social welfare schemes that the poor families and marginalized families can take help of during this pandemic. And the second part that they do is that they also help in identifying traffickers. So when they are visiting villages and they are talking, so they are also being trained to help with the help of the villagers. They are able to identify traffickers and inform police so that those can be held. So during the pandemic, if I share a little bit of data, so we have rescued more than 1,000 children, and 70 traffickers have been arrested. The traffickers have also been identified. A lot of traffickers have also been identified. Some of them we were able to identify through the data we got from railways, where the migrant laborers went back to their homes. So with the help of railways, we were able to identify some traffickers over there. Then some traffickers in the quarantine centers, when they were living in those centers. So we were also able to identify, again with the help of with the community and other law enforcement agencies. We were able to do that. So this is a campaign that is still running. It's a campaign on wheels and currently on bicycles, so that these children they're not children anymore, they're adults, and they're going to different areas of those districts, villages of districts.
Jyoti and Ms. Dave, thank you very much for joining me for this show. Child labor is such an important issue. It's unbelievable that we even have this in today's day and age, that young children are working in professions which are so hazardous. I was out last year in the mica mines of India, in Jharkhand. There were little children out there working. They were put into these mines. They go deep into these mines to draw mica out, which goes into makeup and all other kinds of things around the world. They get 10 rupees a kilogram. That's about 15 cents to a kilogram of mica they get. They spend all day in these mines, and sometimes they'll get mica worth 30, 40, 50 rupees, which is like 75 cents. Beyond that, sometimes these mines just collapse because these are soft mines. Somebody walks on these mines and they collapse, and these children just die. If they're able to ever rescue these children out, they probably suffer for the rest of their lives. So it's a very sad state of how child labor is looked at. All of this was happening in Jharkhand under the auspices of the government. The government is totally aware. It's not as if it's, hidden and tucked away. There are thousands of children out there who are, doing this on a daily basis. The parents obviously are aware. So, long journey for us ahead. I'm going to leave you with the ILO head and the UNICEF head talking about what the large problem is and what they're doing with it. Thank you again, Ms. Mathur. Thank you again, Ms. Dave, for joining me for the show.
This year, as we mark World Day Against Child Labour, COVID-19 threatens to reverse years of progress. As the pandemic wreaks havoc on family incomes without support, many could resort to child labour. A new report from the ILO and UNICEF shows that we might see an increase in child labour for the first time in 20 years.
School closures have disrupted education around the world. Children in child labor who had managed to attend school are at an even higher risk of dropping out now, especially girls. With schools closed, the threat of child trafficking, debt bondage, and all forms of child labor are as great as ever.
Social protection is vital in times of crisis, as it provides assistance to those who are most vulnerable. Social dialogue amongst governments, employers, and workers' organisations is key to prevent and to eliminate child labour.
The choices we make now will have a lasting effect on a generation of children. Together, we must make children our priority.
The UN has declared 2021 the International Year for the Elimination of Child Labour. Now is the time to protect our children from child labour, now more than ever.